And we're back. Happy Monday, everyone. If you're just watching this as it came out, happy Wednesday. I'm Alek Dincoff, speaking with Steve Todd, founder, creator of Open Source Workplace. How are you doing today, Steve?
Doing well, Alek. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. It's getting brighter outside. It's warming up, although I seem a little foggy. I'm not sure why, but my attitude is crystal clear. So other than that, we're doing great.
Love it. I know. Actually, just before we got on, I was actually in the room here, and I'm like, there's light coming through that window. What do we do? How do we do that? There's actually a ray of sunshine over there in the corner. So, yeah, the clock changed made a big difference, so it's good.
Very good, very good. So, what is on your mind? Now, when we last spoke, we had talked about the podcast, different episodes coming out. And this week, if you're tuning in as this airs, we're going to be getting into the Leesman Index. So that's going to be on our podcast. And I know a new video launched, an animated video for Open Source Workplace. It's on a book review. Do you want to dive in a little bit more on those two topics before we get into the nitty-gritty of the normal, everyday humdrum of Open Source Workplace?
Sure. No, I'd love to. So the two things, I'll start the reverse order. You mentioned the animation. As I said before, and we have discussed on these videos, I want to try and give everybody an opportunity to consume the open source workplace content in whatever form or fashion works for them. And obviously, we've got a lot of text up there with your narration. We've got a lot of podcasts out there now, and it's all flowing in different forums. So one thing I want to try and do is, okay, so how do we produce more video content, and how do we allow that then content to be transcribed? And animation on book reviews is a tremendous way to actually visualize and see, and also hear and digest the content and reviews. So today we launched the Elemental Workplace animation. It's the book that was done by Neil Usher. Obviously the review was written by Dan Caban and obviously narrated by yourself. So we brought those two aspects together, and we had it animated, and it went live today. And so happy with the product. Neil Usher, the author of the book, sent a message saying how he's overwhelmed and how amazed he is by the product, and he's so happy, so amazed is what his message was to me. So super excited. I'm just so very happy and grateful that the author thought so highly of it and engaged directly. So that's good, and this shows you the spirit with what we're trying to do with things, right? And leading from that and coming from that spirit of, that's what I always wanted open source to be, an ability to reach as many people as we could with content that is actionable and educational. Just a little side note, I actually got approached today about doing an article in some other magazine. They wanted to do an article actually on me or what I do at NASDAQ. And, it sounded very interesting. And then it came to, well, actually the way they structure how they get compensated, I don't pay anything. But actually they want to know who my vendors are, so they go after the vendors and get the vendors to pay for marketing that'll pay for my article to get published. And to be honest, the disappointment that it came across me, not necessarily the opportunity or whatever it was, but in essence, this is the seed to what the foundation of what I want as open source workplace is. There's so many people out there that want to do the right thing and want to educate people and want to tell people things. And I understand different people have to generate income certain ways, and I understand that that's everybody's up to themselves. But I declined purely because it's not in my philosophy. It's not in the spirit of anything I want to do. I mean, there's no way I would give my vendors out to marketing agencies. I just would never do that. So again, that just sort of speaks to why delivering content as many forms as we can is so important to me. But also, I also take it on myself to ensure the content we do give and we do produce is of a high standard and is actionable and educational for everybody who wants to use it. So again, it's just reiterated today when you've got the author coming out and saying that. So it's really good. And then the second one, the Leesman Index. I love Leesman. I love what they do. I love how they structure and tell and curate stories. You know, and we've obviously engaged with Leesman to get permission to narrate their content, and they have granted us that. So, you know, you've narrated, and I'm super excited to see how it's received. I'm sure at some point I'll put a narration through some of their articles, because it just plays to narration. I think one of the articles you may have narrated, or if not, it'll be up and coming, is on the zoo. You know, how the office is like a zoo, and I just think what that would be like as a narration. You know, it would just be so much fun, and but the content would really resonate. You know. Yeah, so I'm super excited about Leesman. Anyone I've talked to, I've told about Leesman. We're going to be narrating that, and everyone's like, "Oh, that's really interesting," because what they produce is really high quality. And yeah, no, super excited for those two things. But really ecstatic by how the animation's been received. So yeah, so thank you for asking. It's really good.
Very good, very good feedback. That quick as well. How long was the video out before the author got back to you?
I want to say 30 minutes. Yeah.
Wow. That is great. Because a lot of authors, and trust me a little bit on this, I've dealt with some publishing companies and authors as well, when they put so much time and effort into something, and then it's animated or narrated, or, you know, someone else speaks it, or even written about in a blog. If their message doesn't come across, or they feel their voice has been changed, there's a lot of tension, because their blood, sweat, and tears went into that. And I can see, I've heard goods and bads, and I'm very happy that this was another good example of someone saying, yes, thank you for doing justice.
No, absolutely. And this is where Dan, you know, the guy who wrote the review, did such a great job in actually capturing the essence of the book. And, you know, the book is actually, there's so much more content, and Dan mentioned that he didn't include in his review. And that's why it is so important to still go out and buy these books. You know, we put together the reviews to distill the key elements of it, but if you really want to understand every component of it, you know, you do need to buy the book. The book is great, and I have my copy, and it's tremendous. But no, again, it's just all about delivering a service that hopefully people find useful, and yeah, it's good. I'm very happy with it.
So just to confirm, with such a great response here with the first one, do you plan to continue animated book series? And if so, which I think the answer is yes, but if so, will you then talk to writers and expect maybe even more articles written around book reviews?
So I have it set up at the moment where I have I know how many book reviews I'm going to be getting on a monthly basis. So I have that set up, and I have that structured and planned ahead of time. I think on the site, no, I want to say I have maybe 10 to 12 book reviews on the site already. So yeah, they're being lined up. I have one ready to go for next week. I know you're finishing up editing one other narration, so we'll get that to go. But I'm also really curious, looking through some of the content that we've published and you've already narrated. Is there any that are ripe or really good for animation? And there's some that are probably a little too much. So, you know, I've got the 100 ways to be productive at work. You think in essence that's good for narration, but it's just so much, right? But there may be some other ones, you know, okay, what are the 10 things for wellness at work, right? You know, boost engagement. How do you come up with those different things? And so I'm going to play around with some of those ideas. I've got one I've reached out to. I have two animators, so I'll be able to let them go at different times, because it usually narration takes a little bit of time. It usually takes them probably 10 days to, obviously they got to read the content, they got to hear the audio, they got to put everything together in a succinct manner. They got to make sure it tells the right story. So it is a long process, but yeah, so we'll see.
Well, that's interesting that you mentioned that it's a long process with the animators there. Do you give them sort of a storyboard of, you know, at 1 minute I want to see this, at 2 minutes when he says the word Steve Todd open source workplace, that the logo comes in? Or do you just say, hey, it's up to you. Use your creative ability and just give me a product that's going to be good.
And no, that's a great question. So my guidance has always been, here is the text. Here are the graphics that I've included in the text. You'll see it more next week, next week's animation, how that plays more in, because that book review plays very much with the graphics and sort of images that sort of been put together. But I typically leave it alone to the animators, in much the same way I leave you alone to do your voice. I leave my writers alone to do their thing. You know, these are the skilled people. Why would I get involved? Whenever I see it, I have an opinion, and I give my opinion. Usually what I want to see is, you know, tint to color within the animation, so things just pop and catch your eye. Obviously a lot of them are black and white, so it kind of works well with just like a, you know, a red tie, like my red ties or whatever it is, you know, just little things. It's just a little bit of pop of color as things go through. But no, I let the artists be their artists, and you know, it seems to be working so far.
Very good, very good. It's interesting to see, because some people love to manage, or if they have a very detailed plan, or they want it to turn out a certain way, they really go all hands in. But like you said, it's turned out really well, and you've been very much hands off.
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, that's new with the YouTube channel and Open Source Workplace, but is there something else that's going on without? Yes, I see your head nodding.
Yeah, no, so I always like to give updates, right? So how things are moving along. And I can't remember how many co-working locations I told you I had last week, but we're about to turn over 2,700 now. So that's remarkable. And that's a testament again to, you know, the people who have got working on that. I have four folks who are just crunching through. And it's really interesting as you go through and you see all the different co-working locations where they are around the world. And, you know, I've been watching Narcos, and a couple popped up yesterday in Medellin and Calais, you know, so it's all the different cartels. It's like how these things are resonating. But, you know, this is where some of the co-working locations are. You know, we've got them coming from Colombia all the way, you know, China, Australia, everywhere, South Africa. But 2,700, absolutely flabbergasted by how many and how quickly they're getting through all these co-working locations. And as I mentioned, I have a big number in my head, and we'll get there. But it's fascinating. Also, really fascinating to see the different. You can almost tell. I can almost tell now by the images that actually a co-working location has, who the vendor is, so who's actually providing the service. The one I get most often wrong is Regus, R-E-G-U-S. It's the largest co-working provider in the world. They're so diverse in their offering that it's so hard to tell it's theirs or not. So for example, if you're in the US, the traditional markets, they're very executive and sort of, you know, not very inviting, so to speak. But then you get over to Europe, and they're so bright and colorful that you would never think it was Regus. They're the ones that really surprise me in sort of their offering and their images that they're providing. But yeah, just so super happy with the progress that's been made there. As I said, I have a big number in my head. I want to go north of 10,000 locations. I think it's achievable. And, you know, whenever you get to that sort of level, then that means that you're providing a service that's almost encompassing everything. And that's what I want to do, right? I want to build this up. I want to own this space, and I want to provide everybody with one destination to come with all things workplace related. And once we get that done, then we'll really kick on with our conferencing and start building up all these different things, so we do become the go-to resource as we continue to release content and build ways to actually provide content to people. So super excited by it.
Well, I am a firm believer in crowd reviews. Now, there's going to be the outliers that maybe they fake a review or they had a really bad experience. But it just takes that one person to say, hey, I went to this co-working space, their internet was poor. I went back the next day, still poor. I came back a month or two later, it's still poor. Showing up when you have to do work and you have to be there on time from a remote location, having poor internet or a number of other things that could go wrong. Now I know I'm focusing more on the negatives here, not the positives, but saving yourself from that situation, or it could save you an entire day of work, and that value is exponential. So
Yeah.
that's really
Yeah,
good.
no, it is. And the real key thing to know, yeah, we have the ability to rate and review, but only people who are members of Open Source Workplace can actually rate and review. So that means at all times we can track who's saying what. If you're a provider, you get to see who's giving you the rate and who's giving you the review. And obviously, if you want to challenge you want to question, then we'll obviously provide that opportunity as well. But that's what makes it so unique. Yeah, so super exciting.
There's almost more credibility then, because you're not just a quick account created to leave a bad review for either a competitor, or because you're either a landlord and you don't want them there anymore, no, or a neighbor who says, you're driving too much business, or neighbors have disputes all the time. So it's good that you actually have that background to establish credibility, and these reviews will be something that can be trusted.
No, absolutely. Because in essence, I want to, as a user of these services, I want to be able to go to open source, and I want to trust what other people are saying, and I want to make my decisions and my sourcing decisions based on peer-reviewed by reputable people.
And just to touch back on the conference, once those conferences start going and you start reviewing them and get feedback from people that actually join the conferences, oh my goodness. Imagine a company sending 2, 3, 4 people to a conference, whether it be sales, marketing, advertising. I mean, the list goes on. And for everyone to come back and say, what a waste, that's a huge loss for a business. And being able to get a platform that will save companies time, energy, money, people, time, energy, money, and provide, if there is another conference, they can see that right there on your platform and choose that one instead. Exponential gains. That's great.
No, and again, that all comes down from my experience, right? I've went to conferences where I was expecting one thing, and when I went, it was something else, and it irritated me. And I've told as many people, I haven't been able to tell as many people as I wanted to, but this will hopefully provide me the opportunity, and vice versa, right? There's been conferences I've been to which have been fantastic, and I haven't been able to tell enough people, the same way. So that's where I'm hoping these things play out.
And for those of you tuning in, if this is your first episode, I know we're talking a little bit about conferences. Just in the time, maybe the last 4 months, 5 months, Steve's been to 3 or 4 conferences just from working with him. He's always on the go. So he knows what he's talking about. He's not saying, oh, I went to one conference and I wish I could have told people more. Just if you're a new listener or don't know Steve's background, he's constantly either attending, learning, in the field. The list goes on.
Thank you. It's very kind of you to say so.
Credibility, got to make sure everybody knows. So we've looked at the goods of open sourced workplace. We've heard great feedback for the new animated article. Let's talk about some negatives, though. What I just read on open sourced workplace was, what is change management and why is it essential for digital transformation? Great article. Great article. It talks about lots of details, different strategies, but specifically it dives into why efforts for change fail. The not so good topic that sometimes people want to skirt around in a business presentation, right? You always hype up the goods. Well, let's talk about what the negatives, why they fail. In this article, it goes into lack of focus as a key priority. Sometimes, speaking of priority, they say these initiatives for change management are seen as low priority, or the initiative's not taken. And they're considered sometimes risky. Would you agree? Have you seen that when going in and working with companies, that when it comes to change, risk, low priority, or just lack of focus sometimes helps be a horrible, or not, I don't want to say horrible, but a key factor?
No, and your questions, it's a great question, right? And it's an important question. I mean, change management in itself is so hard, right? You're trying to change mentality, culture, the way of doing things, just everything, the way it happens, right? And you're trying to affect change for a specific outcome. And to do that, as I said, is a real challenge. And all those things you just mentioned, absolutely, they're the reasons why things fail. And the biggest thing where you have to really kick in to actually make it successful is to counteract all that is you have to get senior management buy-in, right? You have to get senior leaders right from the top here championing what it is that's and telling people this is what we're going to do, this is why we're doing it, this is how we're going to do it. That's absolutely a key thing. And there's a few other little elements that's kind of interesting. You identify why these things fail. McKinsey actually did a report that actually said the bolder the transformation, the more likely actually it is to succeed. And to your point, right, on that low priority, if people don't see it as a big enough change, then they won't really buy into the fact that it's a true change. And so that's one other way you sort of offset that. And then the other reason why most often that these, to counteract why these things may fail is continual learning, right? So what is that change? And the article specifically goes into digital transformation. And whenever you look, and I mean, I had an experience, not at NASDAQ, but my previous employer, Associated Press, where we were doing a digital transformation. This was an organization that was running all analog technologies, was shifting to digital technologies. And my responsibilities there was sort of managing all the different work streams, financials. So what is the cash flows? What are the P&Ls? What are the ROIs for all those initial investments? I think there were something like 37 work streams that we were working through. And each of those was actually, definitively what is the ROI for each of those work streams. So whenever we were making decisions, they were making the decisions on back of our return on that specific investment. And remember, Associated Press is a for-profit, non-for-profit. It's owned by members and it's run by its members and it's run for its members. So cash is so important. And, one of those things that we always had to do was, okay, how are we learning? Why are we doing this? And actually sitting down and individually going through what is this impact on products? There was always a desired outcome. Okay, so here's where we are today. So how do we actually prepare to get ourselves through that change? How do we design for that change? How do we execute? And then how do we make it sustainable? And obviously, whenever you go through that, you've got the vision of what that digitization and that digital content structure looks like. So it was a fantastic project. It was actually the last project I worked on whenever I was at Associated Press, and it was a lot of fun. But change management is so hard, and that's why there's so many wonderful consultants out there who can, tell you so many tremendous things about how to do it, why to do it, why it's important. In the real estate world where we are today, change management happens all the time. We don't really fully appreciate how much change management goes into what we do. But whenever you're moving a group of people, employees from one location to another location, you're changing their setup, you're changing the environment with which they work. That's why it's so important to understand and get to know those individuals. What is their work processes? How do they do their tasks? So that whenever they do relocate, it actually is an enhancement to them. And that change management structure goes all the way through that process. One of the other aspects of change management in real estate, I know it's not talked about in the article, but I was thinking about how do I take that article and apply it to the things that you and I talk about here. And one of the biggest transformations when it comes to real estate is how people work. Probably 10, 15 years ago, activity-based working in Australia was a really big thing. It's slowly working its way over to the US. But I mean, whenever you take where somebody comes in, they have their own seat every day. They come in, they sit in, they have their pictures, to then go from that environment to an environment where you come in, you go and you book a desk, on your phone for a few hours because of some activity you have to do. That's a complete change management. So how do you do those sort of things? And it's a challenge in a project I've never worked on. I would love to work on something like that because I think it's one of the most challenging projects to work on, but actually it's one of those ones as well where you have to dig deep to really get to understand the basics of what every employee does, because you have to design a space that allows a workplace to provide every environment that every employee needs at any point in time. And that's the biggest challenge, but it's the best challenge. But again, so you go through change management, how does all that work? And yeah, it's a fascinating subject.
So just for anyone watching, the three negatives were seen as low priority, and Steve gave us a quick fix for that. Make it big. Make it huge. Go big with it. Make it real change, not, okay, we're going to have longer coffee breaks. No, make it big. Okay, so that's the first fix. Lack of focus. Get the top priority, the senior leaders on board. The last thing you want to do is have someone come in and say, I don't really know what's going on. This stuff never works anyway. Oh, everyone in their team's not going to be on board. It sounds like. This seems to be the general feel from not only the article, but Steve as well. And lastly, it's considered risky. And I know we didn't touch too much on this, but there's risk in everything. Not changing your business at all is considered risky, especially with digital transformation, how the Internet of Things, how far we've come in the last decade, right? Change is good as long as you're doing it for the good of the business.
No, it is. And that's when I go back to that the very thing you were pointing out there at AP. I remember back in the day, we were trying to work out when is the right time to go from analog to digital. And basically we had we'd calculated an inflection point. In a sense of if we don't shift now, then we may not be around to make the shift later. And that was, when it becomes, the risk was almost the kicker, okay, we got to go now. But to your point, right, the point you just made, the risk is if you don't do it, who knows where you would be today.
Mm-hmm. For anyone watching years into the future, I'm going to say a name that you've probably never heard of, Sears.
Yeah.
Right. They were on top of their game. They were in their market. They were doing really well for a vast amount of time. Well, other companies tried different things. And now I'm going to say a name that everybody knows, Amazon. Well, it depends on how long in the future this is getting watched, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
So
we could also say Kodak, Blockbuster, right? There's a number of ones that well, maybe you don't remember Blockbuster because you're so young,
Well, Steve, I'm going to throw you a curveball. First off, I know I am younger, but no, I do remember Blockbuster. I like Blockbuster. I was upset because I had a gift card when they went under. Last but not least, I found out after I threw away my Blockbuster gift card, there's one left, Steve. It's in Bend, Oregon. Currently, as of this date, March, oh goodness gracious, 11th. Yes, thank you very much. The time change, we just sprung forward, so everything's all messed up in my mind. But as of March 11th, 2019, there's still one left, but they're privately owned, and that's why. So,
I know.
Yeah.
Good.
Hey, don't count me out just yet. Don't count me out just yet.
I like it.
Anyway, so bringing it back in, if there was one of those three, the risk, the priority, lack of focus, if there was one that you had to speak to a team and say, make sure this one especially didn't happen, could you pick? Or just get all three main priority?
Focus. It's got to be focus. Focus, absolutely. It's got to be top of mind. It's got to be in front of everybody. Everyone's got to see that actually this is what we're doing. And that's the biggest risk to avoid, right? It's always the C-suite championing it. And it's very apparent to everyone around you that this change is coming, and highlighting and over communicating all the risks associated by not actually buying in and adopting and trying to adapt the behavioral change. I'd say that would be the number one thing for me.
Well, I've heard that nothing is more effective than a human with laser precise focus. Anything can get done. So absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate you joining us again. Unless there's something you want to add real quick for our viewers. No,
I'm good. Thank you.
All righty. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us again. Like, share, subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. Share on your social media outlets. We'll be here every week. This comes out Wednesdays, about 5 or 6 a.m., so you can catch it right before you head to work. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Cheers.